I was really impressed with Kristaps Porzingis. So one thing to note, Drew Holiday actually came off the bench, which I don't necessarily think was a surprise, given that Porzingis has had a whole offseason, has had a whole September in Boston working with this group. Drew, of course, just started this week. So I wasn't surprised there. I do want to ask about the starting five in a second. Porzingis, 17 points, 5 rebounds. What really stood out to me was the variance in how he was used. So he was at times a hub up top and sort of that Jokic-Sabonis role. His ability to screen and pop and then screen and roll. He caught the lob dunk from Derek White. A screen setter for Jaylen Brown off ball, where Jaylen comes off a pin down. They hit Porzingis. He scores. And then as a floor spacer, this is a guy that shot over 5 threes a game last year and scored or shot 38% from the three. The optionality that this team has now with Porzingis, and I think a lot of people made a big deal this week, as did we, about this Drew Holiday trade. But if I'm a Boston Celtics fan, I'm just as excited, if not more excited, about Porzingis. And another key point, I think, and in talking with Mazzulla a bunch about this, the late game execution, he adds an entirely different layer than what they've had in the past with their personnel.
You have to have a curveball. You have to have something else to go to. And I think that's what the addition of Porzingis will give us, is like our shot selection is going to look different at times this year. And if you look at our late game execution, it's not that we're not trying not to execute. It's that we didn't have a way to change the momentum of the game. Because you have to be able to post, you have to get to the free throw line, you have to make really hard shots. And so I think with the addition of Porzingis, he will take the pressure off of those two guys and allow the space and freedom for them to do what they do. Also give us a curveball of posting, nail ISO. And so it just changes what we're going to be able to do. But I think it frees them. And I think he's going to make a big difference for us.
I'll go quick. I would just say, I feel like I knew that he had this kind of variation to his game. He could be used in multiple ways. Like, this is something that Steve in particular has hit on a bunch with him. I feel like I still undersold how much impact he would have as a roller for this group. That's what kind of popped for me very early on. Because I knew the spacing, you can just space him. He pulls a big away from the rim. You can use him off screens and stuff like that. Him rolling to the basket is just such a big target. And I was kind of wondering, heading into this game, what would be the real differences between him and Rob Williams? Because I feel like Rob is a more violent rim runner, more of a vertical threat in that regard. But at the end of the day, Kristaps is 7'3". And the space that he has to roll into, I'm thinking about him rolling in the middle of the floor with Jaylen Brown in the weak side corner. You can't tag that roll. Or if he lifts up to the wing, there's just no help low. And this is a 7'3" guy against someone that's much smaller than him trying to thwart that. It's just tough to deal with. So I think, in addition to what you said, JJ, I was really impressed with him as a roller in this game. And I think that's going to add yet another dimension. And maybe that helps solve some of the where does the additional rim pressure question come from. It may just be Kristaps rolling more than he ever has.
Yeah.
Not to bounce off or take away too much from what y'all said, with the rolls, it was a reminder that he can do it. Because we've seen so many teams just say, no, you're a switch, Kristaps. And so I wonder how Boston adjusts if that does come along as the season goes on. But I think, to JJ's point, you can do so many things with him, and it fits with what Boston's trying to do offensively. You saw a lot more movement. You saw a lot more flow. And because Porzingis can be used in different ways, hey, we run a set. We have 5 different actions. Now we hit Porzingis space. Or we go with an empty corner action. Let's use Brown and KP as screeners for Jayson Tatum and play out of that. And they can just use all of their threats together to just kind of keep pressure on the defense. I was actually impressed with Kristaps Porzingis' defense. I think we all know it's probably going to be a drop for him most of the time, but it did seem like, and he got hit a couple times by Tyrese Maxey, who was incredible in that first half.
Yeah.
But I did like the versatility they showed. Okay, let's get you up to the level. Let's throw you a late switch out there. Because I think that's the button they're going to have to tap. Because eventually in the playoffs, I don't know how sustainable that drop is going to be.
Mm-hmm. I agree to an extent that against a Damian Lillard, even against Maxey in a playoff series, or potentially a Tyler Hero, right? Jalen Brunson, you do have to press something else at some point in time. The counter to that, though, is Derek White and Drew Holiday are as good as any player in the NBA at navigating those screens and being able to either blow it up, go under to a quick recover and get a contest, or that rear view contest. Those guys are so good at that. And I was paying particular attention to that when Kristaps was on the court, like how Derek White navigates a high pick and roll at 35 feet with Maxey. Now, Maxey got off. There's no question Maxey got off. But I do think it's not going to be something that's like, all right, we got to have him up all game. Like, you're going to be able to mix it up. And Brad Stevens talked about his defense when he sat down with us in the third quarter. We got to figure out ways for him to use his length both on and off the ball. It's interesting, going back to the offense for a second, it's interesting, in talking about the late game stuff and just the variance there, I also go back to the lineup variance, where you guys are talking about him as a roller, and I mentioned him as a spacer or as a popper. His ability to play 4 and 5, I think, is really interesting with this group, and potentially probably guarding fives, where Al would probably guard who's ever that second big or the bigger wing. I think there's a lot to be excited about here. And it's going to be fascinating. I believe this. It's going to be fascinating to see how Joe Mazzulla manages the starting lineup. He said to us before the game, we've got 6 starters. And I know 2 of them. He said, I know 2 of them. And that's Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum. And so there will be, I think, a level of sacrifice from some of these guys. Do you guys have an opinion on sort of what the, as we say in golf, the stock yardage of a club is? What's the stock? What should be the stock starting lineup for this team?
Honestly, I think I'd go trend quote unquote smaller with this group. I think I would start Derek White and Drew Holiday together. Go Jaylen Brown, Jayson Tatum. Go Kristaps. I think that helps with some of the regular season maintenance with Al Horford. And depending on matchup, obviously you can slot Al Horford back into the starting lineup and bring one of those guards off the bench. But I think you start with. I think you want to keep Jayson Tatum at the 4.
I'm trying to think outside the box here. I think it's going to be very hard to not start Drew Holiday. I think it's going to be very hard to not start Kristaps Porzingis. What I do think is, whether it's Drew or Derek White, if you have Al Horford, he can help Porzingis with some of the defensive stuff. Whether it's Drew or Derek White who starts, they can now help Peyton Pritchard with some of the defensive stuff in that second unit lineup. And I think because of how much they value Pritchard, that's going to be key. So I imagine it may end up just being Derek White. But, I mean, if you could get the buy-in from Drew, that would make a bunch of sense. I think it's more important, like, my mind is going to who closes with this group. I think that closing lineup would probably be closer to what you said, Nekias, depending on matchups. But it's just going to be based on, it's hard to sit Al down. It's hard to sit Drew down. It's hard to sit Derek White down. I'm stuck.
Yeah. You bring in Drew, who was an all-star last year, and just a fantastic player. You look at last year, particularly I thought in the playoffs, Derek White was their 3rd best player. So how do you not start him? You bring in Porzingis coming off a career year, who previously had made an all-star game. It's like, how do you not start him? Al is so valuable. How do you not start him? The point about being able to toggle these lineups, I think, won't matter as much in the playoffs. Certainly one guy, if they go to a stock lineup and it's not based on matchups in the regular season, one guy's going to have to sacrifice a little bit here. But the ability to toggle between lineups based on who your opponent is in a series is really interesting to me. Last thing on Porzingis that I thought was interesting in talking to Joe before the game, it's obvious that him playing with a Jayson Tatum or a Jaylen Brown or a Drew Holiday, like, it's going to make Porzingis better on both ends of the floor. Joe Mazzulla said he's actually going to make the game easier for Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And I think particularly with the spacing and with the pick and roll, I leaned into this last year with the redundancy of Brown and Tatum and not really having like another real threat to play pick and roll with. And Al, previously when he was like with Kyrie and Isaiah Thomas, I thought he was great in that pick and pop and that short roll. But he's not the same player he was 5 or 6 years ago. And so now you're at a stage where Tatum and Brown are in their prime, and Porzingis is probably the best guy they've had to play pick and roll with. So I think, he's going to make them better. And then the other thing that Joe said that I found fascinating, he said, we haven't seen the best of Kristaps Porzingis yet. And by that, he meant not counting stats, not like he's going to go out and average 26 and 11. He's like, he hasn't played this meaningful of basketball. He hasn't had this pressure and expectation. And that ultimately is what's going to bring out the best in him.
I can see it. Like, I think this is easily the most talented team that he's been a part of. And I think you're looking at like playoff pressure and stuff. The best example we have of that in his career so far is the Luka stretch. And when we saw him play the best, he got hurt. And then the following year, it was, hey, why is he just being spaced? Yeah. And why is he not getting posted up? And so now being able to play off of these guys, like I would imagine a lot more opportunity, again, a lot more room for him to operate and to bounce off of you and what Joe said. Just his presence alone, I think, is going to open up some more things for the Jays. So I'm with you.
Yeah, I was on that Dallas team. Rick Carlisle told Kristaps to just go stand in the corner the whole series. God,
Nekias agreed.
Utah Jazz 2017. Doc told me after game 1, this is not your series. Go stand in the corner. I was like, all right, this is going to be shitty. But then you just get crushed in the media, and then it's like, oh fuck. I felt so bad for Kristaps.